Reaching the southern end of Yutongar took only 15 days. With the days growing longer, the distance they covered each day had increased noticeably. Varkas guided his horse with caution along the rugged mountain paths, and when he caught sight of the camp nestled between the folds of the valleys, he reined in his mount. At the base of a gentle slope, high wooden walls and watchtowers stretched into view. The moment he approached, the guards hurried to remove the wooden barriers and clear the path. "Welcome back, Your Grace." The soldiers lined up beside the checkpoint and raised their spears in a position of readiness. Varkas passed through them while carefully examining the camping site dense with military tents and asked, "Did anything occur in my absence?" "In fact, it is." The soldier hesitated and stumbled over his answer. Varkas narrowed his eyes while handing the reins to the stable hand. "Is there a problem?" A messenger from the Northern Coalition arrived this morning at dawn. A young aide wearing a jacket embroidered with the Siorcan family crest answered in place of the soldier who had frozen in place, and continued. "We have not yet received precise details about what news he carries, but it is clear that something serious has occurred. The emergency meeting that began in the morning has not concluded even now." Varkas drew his brows together. If the besieged Haidam had finally launched a full-scale attack, it would have been sufficient to push the rear support forces to the front. But the prolongation of the discussion meant a problem far more complex than that had occurred. "It seems I must proceed to the command post immediately. I'll leave the return procedures to you." Varkas left brief instructions for Burov, who had followed him into the camp, then crossed the camping site heading directly for the large tent above which the flags of various families flew. In that moment, the sound of sharp shouting resonated from inside. He could not make out the words through the surrounding noise, but it was clear that a heated argument was taking place. He suppressed a heavy exhale and stepped inside the tent. "What is all this commotion?" "Your Grace." Darren rose from his place the moment he saw him and appeared visibly relieved. "When did you return?" "I thought you would stay in Kalmor for several more weeks." "I just arrived." Varkas cut off Darren's elaborate speech and glanced to the side into the meeting room. There were family representatives, high-ranking knights from the Imperial army, and a young man who appeared to be from the Northern Coalition nobility seated around a long table. Varkas recognized the young man as one of the Plistone family's sons and his eyes narrowed. Was his name Cedric? The young man had the pale face characteristic of Northerners and dark red eyes, and was looking at him with an expression suggesting he was holding back an eruption of rage. "You arrived at the right time. I wanted to ask the Duke personally for his opinion on this incomprehensible situation." "Mind your manner. The person you are addressing is the ruler of the East." A cavalry knight from the East who had been sitting opposite shouted in an angry voice. Varkas indicated with his hand for him to be silent, then sat naturally at the head of the table. "Tell me what happened." "I'll listen. It is said that His Highness the Crown Prince has unilaterally broken the engagement." Darren spoke on behalf of Cedric Plistone, who was boiling with rage, and continued in a somber tone. Immediately after that, he led the Imperial army and entered the depths of the Yutongar mountains. The Northern Coalition's leading the operation to suppress the rebels stemmed from our belief that restoring relations with the Empire was possible. Cedric Plistone did not allow anyone a chance to respond to the shocking news, but continued with a sharp voice. "But the Empire completely deceived and humiliated our family. Tell me yourself, Your Grace, do you think we should submit to the Empire after enduring all this humiliation? Stop pouring your anger in the wrong direction. This situation is the result of the Crown Prince's unilateral action, not an error of the Duke of Siorcan." One of the nobles who had been sitting in silence intervened with a composed voice. He was the commander of the forces dispatched from the south. The man who clasped his hands on the table continued calmly. "What matters now is how we respond. The Northern Coalition army has no intention of remaining at the front." The young northern noble declared firmly. We will not withdraw the army immediately, but we will not be at the vanguard of eliminating the rebels as we previously promised. We paid the full price for that sin in this incident. The young man responded through clenched teeth. My family has been subjected to an indelible humiliation. My sister was left alone at the altar in view of hundreds of nobles in degrading humiliation, and the Plistone name has become a laughingstock throughout the empire. Enough complaints. Varkas placed his hand on his temple and fixed the man with an ice-cold look. This is not a place for lamenting your family's grievances. It is the command center of the Imperial coalition army. If you are not going to speak in a manner befitting this place, it would be better to remain silent. The young man's face reddened in an instant. Varkas rose slowly. I understand the situation. We'll leave the minimum defensive forces and move the army immediately toward the Yutongar entrances. For what purpose are we moving? A knight who had been silent spoke. He was the commander of the forces dispatched from the west. Are you planning to dissuade the crown prince from what he's doing, or to support him in attacking Hytem? That depends on the situation. Varkas answered with clinical flatness, and continued. If I succeed in catching up with the crown prince before actual combat begins, I intend to grab him by the collar and drag him back to the altar against his will. Despite the audacity of this statement, no one dared to object. It appeared they finally understood that his mood had sunk to its lowest, for some nobles swallowed with rigid faces. Varkas scanned their faces and added with coolness. But if the worst has already happened, then I will need to make a choice between two things. What do you mean by choosing between two things? The crown prince, or the empire? I will be required to decide. A terrifying silence descended on the meeting room after this dangerous declaration. Varkas left the tent behind them, then issued his instructions in a firm voice. Prepare to move out immediately. I will not permit even a moment's delay. Varkas led the coalition army and marched north directly. The Imperial elite forces under the Crown Prince's command were supposed to have penetrated the passes and reached the middle of the Yutongar Mountains, directly before the rebels' stronghold. To catch up with them, he needed to reduce the number of forces to a minimum to increase speed. Varkas divided the forces, sending a vanguard unit ahead while the main force followed carefully at regular intervals. After a long march, Varkas spotted an army encamped in a wide basin and raised his hand to stop the surging lines. He saw the Imperial army's flags fluttering amid the faint glow of evening. It seems we caught up with them. Edric Ruban, who was following directly behind him, cried out in a brightened voice. But Varkas could not share that feeling. He watched with narrowed eyes and examined the camp spread along the mountains. The number of personnel had decreased to a degree that was clearly visible even from a distance. It seems what I feared has occurred. Burov gave a quiet groan.